Greg,
Hi, Hugh. How's it going?
I've been sick, like always. You know,
Yeah, your voice shows a little bit there. It's
I
another
lost
full
my
moon.
voice for a week again.
It's that time to hear your story again. And this time for those who don't know, I'm Greg. I'm writing Hugh's book. Wrote one other book, Why is the Moon a Cube, about symbolism and Indian mounds and ancient architecture and structures. Now I'm writing Hugh's book. So he was going to tell us about his secretary from one of his businesses back in 1980 and how that applies to his life today. So let's give it over to you, Hugh, and tell us everything you want to say today. But don't strain your voice. We don't want you to lose it completely.
Okay, Greg. This is my usual full moon video. It's 16th of February, 2022. I had a business and a partner. His name was Del Carpus. And Carpus is in the history books, not in a good way. Now, he was part of the people with Al Capone and Bob Barker and people like that who rebelled against taxes in the government. He wasn't one of the people. He was the son of one of the people. He and I were partners in a business in Michigan. I can't remember the city. I don't know if it was Mount Clemens. It was on 16 Mile and Garfield, or Groesbeck, I'm sorry, 16 Mile and Groesbeck, back in the 70s and 80s. And we did all the Sears warranty work. Sears would warranty things they sold in their stores, not only to homes, but to businesses also. And we would put rooftop units on malls and restaurants like Burger King and McDonald's, the Western Stockades in Michigan. And then we would guarantee the work through Sears warranty. And Sears warranty also sold homes. And we'd go into the homes that Sears bought and resold and owned the contracts on them. We'd make sure that the furnaces and air conditionings and all the electrical worked in them. And that's pretty much what Shelby Service was. And we rented that factory from Jack Ruby's trademark, the Carousel. And the customers in that business were very wealthy people. People like Tony Tocco, he owned the Western Stockades and a few Burger Kings, I believe. And then he had Detroit businesses, and people know Sarah McLaughlin from Canada. McLaughlin Steel was one of my companies. And Mars Candy. And then I would go to all the bars, restaurants, and malls in Michigan and service the rooftop units, either myself or Dale or somebody we hired. That business, I was originally introduced to Dale by secretary, who wasn't my secretary yet. Dale and I hired her as our secretary. And this was back around 1979, 78. I met Janet playing with D. Savage. People know the Savage Nation. Michigan, we had Savage Grace, D. Savage, Jim Gold in the gallery. And I played in a lounge called Arlene's down the street on Groesbeck Highway or Gratiot Avenue, I forget which. But Arlene's was Bo Diddley. Who do you love? Arlene, tell me, who do you love? Well, I performed at that nightclub quite a bit after that song came out in the 50s for Arlene. Arlene was a real person. And I was playing at Arlene's with Jim Gold's brother and a guy by the name of D. Savage, who lived in Sterling Heights, Michigan at the time, in an apartment building. And I was we were playing rock and roll at Arlene's. And during one of my breaks, a woman named Janet Bauman came up to me and started talking to me. And she introduced me to Dale Carpus and Tony Tocco and Laughlin Steele and people like that in the audience. And we hit it off from there for several years. She became my secretary, and we rented a big building from Carousel, Jack Ruby's trademark. And during that time, my child was kidnapped off her school bus, and Janet come over and helped me, and even babysat my children for me at her own home after that happened. And it was during that time I decided to make my children go back and live with the first mother I had divorced 12 years earlier. Because in between that time, the FBI detained me for Jimmy Hoffa's murder. And I divorced my second wife. I had become I was a publisher, and I had created a new genre of music, a different type of music. And I was already a writer and a composer member at ASCAP and BMI in New York, one ASCAP Square. And when I wrote music all the time. Like, this is all music I wrote. You can see. And these are notes of songs I was writing. And you can see there's thousands. I wrote over 2,000 songs in this new genre. This is song after song, poetry that I wrote. And because I was a composer and author member of ASCAP, and I was real organized. I would write it and at my business, see bottom line advertising. And these are all songs I wrote, and I'd put them in, I'd organize them and keep track of when I wrote them, copyright them. And you can see there's just tons of songs I wrote. It's all in a new genre because rock and roll was phasing out. Here's a whole concert I wrote for Broadway. Just to show you. It's that thick, and it's about 40 minutes long. And I would actually write it out for every instrument. And I was working with people like Stephen Sondheim and Tommy Volando, who owned Fox, the real Fox Entertainment. And I would do songs on music notation like this, and to sell them, they had to end up in. Here's others. Here's one I called Cute Little Smiles. And you can see it's just in notation on staff paper. You see these are all songs I wrote. And I wrote over 2,000 songs. This is an idea. These are all individual songs. And I published them and I put them in my catalog at ASCAP. And I had 28,000 worldwide entertainment contracts. And here's a, a file of just plain copyright forms, but you know, I would copyright everything I did, publish it. Then I met Morton Gould at ASCAP. He was the president of ASCAP. He sat down and played some of my music, and he wrote me back. And he said, "You're a genius, and you've created a whole new genre of music." And he instantly made me a publisher in Foley Federal Court. And, here's more. I mean, 2,000 songs is a lot of work. And I had music all through college. And I earned my living performing, playing music all my life. So it was no small undertaking for me. I lived music every awake moment of my life. I would write songs like, those of you who know rock and roll, Stevie Nicks, I went to a Stevie Nicks concert and she sang right to me in heart. A lot of rock and roll was marking my life because I was in the Detroit Musicians Union. And that's what musicians do. They sing songs back and forth and include other people in their songs. Stevie Nicks wrote a song called Gold Dust Woman. And it's about a woman hurting her boyfriend or her husband. And she calls her a black widow spider in the shadows. And this was my answer to her. And it's in a book form that could be sold. And it was part of my ASCAP catalog, but it wasn't in rock and roll. It was in this new genre that I had created. And like, here's the handwritten notation I would use before creating a song. And when I wrote this song in answer to Stevie Nicks, Lee Iacocca put me in charge of building this shadow assembly line. And I built the shadow assembly line in a warehouse on 8 Mile an Hour Drive. And, I would do it like this. I got tons and tons of original music the world never heard. And when I did this particular album, the seal on the shuttle broke. And I'm Squire. Squire puts rovers on Mars, and my uncle Clayton at NASA put the astronauts on the moon. I released this album, published it, put it in the Copyright Office and Library of Congress, and all of a sudden the seal on the shuttle collapsed, and my trademark was stolen worldwide by 2,500 American corporations. And it's around this time that Sharon Collins from London asked me to marry her, but not the Sharon Collins Ozzy Osbourne's married to, but a blonde-haired Sharon Collins from the same family, whom I'd gone to school with all my life. And unfortunately, for the second time in my life, I had to tell Miss Collins, no, I can't marry you. I was dating another woman, Victoria. That was my third murdered wife on the Manning farm. I was dating Victoria Mellon. And I wouldn't cheat Sharon Collins, and I wouldn't cheat Victoria. So I had to look Sharon in the eyes. And she had just divorced Anderson, had treated her terribly. He was, she told me he was a drug addict and he would beat her. And I can believe that because Anderson is one of the families that would torture me in Osbourne's basement with Hall and Andrews. They were all governors in different states in Michigan, Long and Wallace, and Anderson was one of those families. I was 4 when they did that to me, so I can't even imagine what they did to Sharon Collins when I left her. Sharon and I grew up playing music together in school bands, and she was right from London. And no mistaking that, her accent was British, and she was a really nice girl, and she loved me. And after I told her I was dating someone else and I couldn't marry her, she died of cancer the following year. And I don't even know what type of cancer she had. She had asked me twice in my lifetime to marry her. And the first time I was busy with my publishing company. I had become a composer and I had formed Bottom Line Band, and I was busy playing every 7 nights a week. And my first wife, Nancy, had raped me, so I had to tell her no because Nancy came back to me and told me she was pregnant. So twice in my life, I missed marrying a really nice girl from London named Sharon Collins. And it was about that time in my life when I released that album. And I was still going to college with the Cook family. The Cook family, I had bought a farm from Mazar through Giles, Mr. Giles. And I got to the property with my kids, and there was a CIA gun and drug trade being run on it by a pharmacist in Michigan by the name of Hank or Henry Bouguet, a Bucky Larson. The Blanchard family lived next door. Bobby Brooks lived there, who was raised by my history teacher, Cosmo Plotz in Warren High. And I'm the Brooks family, that's my aunt. And her husband was Flayton, General Flayton in the Marine Corps. And General Flayton put the astronauts on the moon at NASA, according to news that I've read throughout my life. The last time I saw Mr. Flayton, he was dying in a hospital. I never saw him again. And his wife, we called her Irish, Doris Brooks, she was already dead. And she died on, I don't know if it was 9/11 or 8/11, around 1990. And not long after that, maybe 10 years later, he died. Yeah, he was a nice man. He was my father's friend from World War II. This is a picture of Janet, and I don't know if anybody can see this. Can you see that, Greg?
Yeah, it's coming across clear. Mm-hmm.
Her name was Janet Bauman. And in this picture, she was 49, I believe. And she was a pianist. She was the best pianist I ever knew. They wouldn't let her on the radio either. And she was better by far than anyone I ever knew in my lifetime. She could sit down in the music I wrote and just showed you. She could play it instantly, and it didn't matter what key it was in. And she had perfect pitch, and she was a beautiful woman. She should have been on the TV and radio, but they wouldn't let her. And that was her name, Janet Bauman, and that was her son, Jimmy. And Jimmy was selling, back then, from his bedroom. He was only about 14 in that. He was selling football cards, the illegal gambling cards in his bedroom. He had a brother, Tony, who cleaned cars and was like a car mechanic in Michigan at that time. And she had a daughter. And she would come up to where I performed, and she liked me. And she introduced me to Mr. Karpus and Tony Toko and Laughlin Steel Company owner. And I became a partner with Dale Karpus at Shelby Service Center because of her. And then we would pay her to be our secretary, and she'd take the calls and send us out on our jobs. And she'd collect the Sears warranty calls from Sears warranty every day. And she'd send me out on my jobs. And she sent me to various jobs that would just blow the average person's mind. She sent me to a Mars party store in Detroit one afternoon to fix the cash registers. As I got into the store, the owner of the store was raping a little girl in the back room. And my life was pretty much like that my entire life. When you walk in on a business owner raping somebody, it's a real awkward position to be in. She sent me to Laughlin Steel, who was a doctor, and the world knows as Sarah McLaughlin. I don't know if I pronounced that name right or not. She was another piano player. And one of her family members was a psychiatrist who had patients in her home. And when I say patients, she would administer methadone because they were drug addicts. And whenever I would go to her home to fix her heaters or something wrong with the electrical, she would tell me to stay away from her patients. And it dawned on me that this was the drug trade I had stopped. And when I stopped at that drug trade, they didn't kill me. They absorbed me into what they were doing. And that's because it was the CIA themselves running the drugs. People like Kiki Camarino and Robert Tosh Plumley. And then I'm a relative to presidents, so they didn't want to just kill me because I protected kids and stopped their illegal gun and drug trade. They had to tolerate me. And that's pretty much how I met Janet Barclay, through my performances. And she and I worked together, and I was actually, at the time I met her, she was going to college at Macomb Community College with a girl named Mary Miller. And Mary Miller was teaching at the college with some other teachers there. And her friend was a Dr. Breen. He was a dean at Macomb Community College, an ex-Catholic priest. And Mary Miller would come to my house, and she would come to my performances. Jan would come to my performances, and both Mary Miller and Janet loved me. And I was a single guy. Sometimes Mary would date me, sometimes Janet would date me. I'd get off of work and Janet would take me home, make me dinner, and make love to me. Mary Miller would come to my house and want to go out and make love, And Janet and Mary, I'm pretty sure they knew each other. And I was going to college a single guy. I tried to space them out. And I dearly loved both of them. Mary Miller, eventually I lived in a home with her at on Marion Street in Warren. But she grew up in Oakland County where I grew up, and she was the girl that got slit across her throat by the same rapist that kidnapped me at 4. Only she was about 12 or 13 when it happened to her, and she got a knife away and stabbed the guy in the stomach before they could take her and chain her in Osbourne's basement. Nobody believed her story when she got home. Her parents didn't believe her, even though she had a slit throat. And she got mad and she ran away. She hitchhiked to California and got a degree in computer science in California. And when she came back to Michigan and started coming to my performances, we dated and made love and swapped stories. And it dawned on me that this is a little girl that grew up on the street next to my street in Oakland County. And the same people that didn't go to jail when I was tortured and raped and they murdered my twin had gotten a hold of her 10 years later. So I always felt bad for her. And I tried to help her get the house she lived in Warren. She lived next door to my uncle's, Tony Squire. His son ran, he didn't run, but he ran the sign language department at Wayne State College. Him and his wife taught sign language to deaf mutes so they could attend college, get a degree, hopefully be self-sufficient. And his name was Dick Squires, Richard Squire. And his father ran Henry Ford's mansion in Detroit back when I was growing up with the Lincoln family. And none of that's coincidence. Susan, his mother, Susan, always talked about King. And that was Anthony Squire's wife, Susan, and her brother King. And the world knows Stephen King, and that's not coincidence. I don't know how the relationships in his wife's family goes, but those are my cousins. And the reason Anthony Squire was running Ford's mansion is because his brother, my father, married my mother, and my mother's ancestor was with Lincoln in Ford Theater as he was shot by the actor Booth. The same as I was working with all of the Kennedy family as they were murdered. And I was covered up by Hollywood. And I grew up with all the people on your money, Jackson, Hamilton, Lincoln, Chase, Morgan, because they're my family. They're my cousins in Michigan, and they're on your money. Janet Bauman, for whatever reason, this really great piano player, and you can see in the picture, she's had a really nice piano. And that was the apartment she bought with the money Dale and I gave her on Utica Road. And at this time, she was a lot older than me. She would date me and have sex with me. And she loved me. I was just fun to her. When she met, prior to that meeting, I was playing for a Mr. Barclay. He had a restaurant and lounge across from an airport on 15 Mile, and I believe it was Ryan Road. And I would play at Ryan's Roadhouse. This is back when you had, what was his name? Jim Morrison in the Doors singing about, I'm going to the Roadhouse, gonna have a real good time. Well, I was working for Morrison Trucking and playing at the Ryan Roadhouse. And then I would play at Barclay's Lounge down the street on Ryan, about 3 miles down. So half the week I'd play at the Roadhouse, and the other half of the week I'd play at Barclay's restaurant and lounge. And he was across from an airport. And when I was about probably 14, maybe no, 15 years old, I had just gotten my driver's permit, and I bought myself a little car, a Corvair, with my paper route, and I used to cook at Ted's, not far from the Marcus Sly Fox, where Hoffa disappeared from. I was a busboy, and then they made me a short order cook at Ted's, and there was 2 locations. There was one in Pontiac across from what used to be the stadium for the football games, Pontiac Stadium. And then there was one down by the Marcus Sly Fox. The one by the Marcus Sly Fox was by Dire Straits' house. And that's where you got the song, "Look at that monkey, look at that yo-yo, look at that faggot, he's a millionaire." And they were singing right at me. I have no doubt about that. And that was on Telegraph.
Just so nobody gets confused with that, Hugh, you're not saying that you're gay. Some people are going to take that to mean that you're
I
saying
had been
gay.
raped by gays
Right.
at the age of 4, kidnapped and raped, and they knew it.
Right.
And out in front of Dire Straits' house was Weiner and Associates, and I was playing for my school, for Dale Towers at my school. I was playing music at the restaurant across the street from Dire Straits' house on a stage. And then I hired an attorney there when I was 15, Weiner and Associates, in front of Dire Straits' house, to protect my trademark bottom line. And instead, Weiner and Associates and 2,500 corporations, they took my money and stole my trademark. And that was the beginning of the theft of my life while I was in 9th grade in high school. And I was already a teacher. I was teaching electronics and science in Warren Consolidated with Jim Garrison. And Garrison co-created the JFK archives that everybody knows as the Warren Commission report. Garrison and Manning co-created the JFK archives. 20 years later, 2 of my wives would be murdered on the Manning Civil War properties in Tennessee after I was the alumni of Jim Garrison. And the Senate, the White House, Joe Biden and Obama's White House, the Clintons, they hired people to murder 2 of my wives. Terry Heath, as Sarah Heath Palin, was murdered on my birthday. And then Jerry Lewis's poster girl on the Babalo boats, my next wife, 7 years later, was murdered on the Manning Ranch. And it was at that point I realized they had set me up on Manning's ranch to murder my wives so they could hide the truth I carry about JFK's murder. And the governors that kidnapped me at birth, or at 4, on the day Admiral Byrd was murdered. And none of this is American history. They hide these things from Americans. Admiral Byrd was murdered, I believe it was March 1957. On that day, my father's hands were cut off. I and my twin were kidnapped. I was chained to a toilet in Osbourne's basement. In Michigan, Osbourne was a former governor. And I was handed to Osbourne by Long, who was Huey Long's family, Wallace, Anderson Andrews, and Hall was there. And all these people were governors or families of governors. And they all raped me at the age of 4. They tortured me, beat me up, and raped me, and murdered my twin. And my twin came from California with Sirhan's family. Mrs. Long introduced him to me in my kindergarten class. after the first time I was kidnapped and raped. And then that night, my twin was murdered as Sirhan showed up in Michigan at my elementary school. I was in kindergarten. And there's no lie in this. This is true. My cousin, my dad's brother, Pete, his son, married Camille Sirhan. Camille Sirhan is the little girl that moved from California to Michigan. I gave her a hug because she was crying, and I told her I miss my dad too. And this was in 1957. My own cousin married the Sirhan family when I was 20. They told you that my family murdered Bobby Kennedy, and this is a complete lie because I'm related to the Kennedys and to Jackie. And you writing my book, you already know DuPont stole my trademark with Claire Cummins. You already know that. And what else did the DuPont family do to the Kennedy family, Greg?
Well, DuPont, they bred thoroughbred horses, and then Jacqueline was riding a horse, fell off of one of those DuPont horses when that led to her death. She fell in front of Graham and Lambert, and those more famous names in your story there were right there with her. And then she died of the injuries from falling off that horse.
Yes, and you know that I grew up with her family. They came to all my performances. I went to school with the Lambert family, and Graham ran the media in Oakland County, Michigan. And I'm sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice. So all of this had happened prior to me meeting Janet Bauman. And Janet Bauman, she was a love of mine. And I've never known a piano player better than her. She was by far 1,000 times better than Sarah McLaughlin. I put her piano tunes up in the group you created. Janet Barclay was much better than that woman, but they wouldn't allow her on the radio. And I suspect it's because she knew the same truth I knew. And I had music playing on the radio, and then everybody stole my trademark when I started to make it worldwide. I got a worldwide publishing license. They pulled all my music. And then they stole my first and last and middle names. And I'm not, people think I'm bragging, and I'm not. I was raised to be a Catholic priest in Joe Walsh's parish, and Joe Walsh at Don Darrow down the street from where I went to church was the Eagles. And he grew up on 4th Street, and Ricky Nelson marked me at the garden party, and I'm gardener. And he said, Mr. Hughes hid in Dylan's shoes. And I own Hughes Street in Oakland County, which is now Baker College, and became Hoover High School, Hazel Park High School, as John Fitzgerald High School closed, and they murdered Kennedy. None of this is coincidence, and all of it was planned by civil engineers in colleges. And you've researched this, and you know I'm saying truth.
Definitely.
And
wasn't there a song, Positively 4th Street?
yeah, Positively 4th Street, and that's Bob Dylan. And then when you started writing when you introduced me in your first book in chapter 11, and said I was the truth of Kennedy's murder, then Bob Dylan wrote a song about Kennedy. It's not coincidence. They've marked me in music all my life, and not just music, TV, movies, and all news. but they use my name and trademark and pretend I, the owner, don't exist. And this is the government, the FBI, the CIA, who really murdered Kennedy, hiding me in all media. Everything Americans have learned is complete propaganda. You've read a lot of books about Hoffa and seen movies, right, Greg?
Yeah, and researching all this, sure.
Was I in any of them?
No.
I'm the very first person the FBI detained because my mother-in-law was with Jimmy Hoffa at the Sly Fox as he disappeared. And I had just bought a car from Whitey. And the FBI detained me in front of 7 or 8 kids in my Troy, Michigan driveway for Jimmy Hoffa's murder. And I'm not mentioned anywhere, am I?
It's impossible to conceive how that could be, isn't it?
Yeah. And then Tony Tocco, who Janet Bauman introduced me to, and Miller wrote books and said they were part of Miller's death. And they found blood in a house I helped Miller buy. And
Yeah.
they covered for me. So Janet Bauman, after the FBI tried to set me up for Hoffa's murder, to hide my truth of who really killed Kennedy, that's what they were doing. And that's what the CIA gun and drug trade was doing. They were
Right.
trying to make it look like I was a drug dealer, and I'm not. And
Right.
how long have you known me, Greg?
I think since 2018.
And have you ever seen me smoke?
No.
Do I do any drugs?
No.
You ever see me drink? I'm always sober, right?
Definitely.
I've been like that all my life. And her and Tony Tocco and Miller tried to take the fall protecting me when they tried to frame me because they knew the government was hiding my truth of who murdered the Kennedys.
Right.
So this woman not only loved me in a bed, she was my secretary. And the whole time, she and her friends were protecting me from the people who really murdered Kennedy.
And to prove that more, talk about her brother a little bit.
Well, her brother left Michigan 15 years prior to me meeting her. And he moved to Tennessee. Now, there's more to this story. I'll tell you about her brother. His name was James Bauman. And just like her son was James, she named her son after her brother. And her brother was an attorney in Greenville, Tennessee. And when I was set up on the Manning Ranch, most likely by the Walters family and Mr. Manning, and Walters covered the JFK murder on CBS, Barbara Walters and Walter Cronkite. They asked me to burn down their properties. And in Tennessee, you have Walters State College. They tried to hire me to burn their properties down. I told them no. And then a year later, Terry Heath was murdered. And Terry Heath is the same family as Sarah Heath Palin, I believe, who ran against Clinton and Obama. And then Garrett at CBS from his White House journalist office was sending me FBI computers from the Clinton era, just getting them out of the White House. He just sent me boxes full of computers out of the FBI offices in Clinton's White House, just before they murdered Terry and Vicky. And I'm sorry, I got lost because I loved Terry and Vicky very much. They were murdered 7 years apart. So
You were talking about how Bauman was about to.
Yeah,
how you
James
found him at
Bauman
the
was an
scene.
attorney in Greenville, Tennessee. And when Terry was murdered, I hadn't put all this together yet. Because as Terry was murdered 7 years prior to her, Kiki was murdered. And Kiki was a girl I was going to marry back in Michigan in 91. But my own brother raped her in front of my kids and her kids. So we didn't get married because my brother, my older brother, raped her in front of our kids. We didn't think it would be a wise move to get married and have 4 kids together, possibly 5. We separated, went our own ways. Kiki was murdered when I stopped that illegal gun and drug trade run by Robert Tosh Flumley and Kiki Camarino. And then I moved away. I went to Tennessee. And I lived next door to Alex Jones, who owned the Greenville Sun for a time. And then as I lived there, next to the owner of the Greenville Sun, I ran the church music and I published Disney, and James Taylor would sing Disney songs with me at our church services. And we were on the radio. And this was at Greenville, Tennessee, where Kinzer Park is. And even Kinzer fits into what was done to me. And you're aware of that, but nobody else. And it's in your book when your book comes out. I think people will read about General Kinzer. Am I correct in assuming that, Greg?
I think there was I don't remember coming across the general. I think there was a song with Kinzer. I can't remember. I have to go back and review it, but I can't.
I don't know if he was a general or a major or a lieutenant. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure he'll be in your book because you're the one that pointed that out to me.
Yeah.
So by accident, I ended up with all these people in Greenville, Tennessee, related to Lincoln's murder and to Kennedy's murder, and I didn't know it. The first day I arrived in Tennessee, there were the Lilly-Led Murders right next door to my trailer. I had bought a teardrop trailer. And witches murdered an entire family right next to me. It's called the Lilly-Led Murders. And that happened when I first moved to Tennessee and was staying just prior to me staying in Kinzer Park. While I was in Kinzer Park, the Osbourne family that had kidnapped me at 4 showed up from Alaska, pretending to be a Divine Time Ministry. And they stole all my handwritten letters from John F. Kennedy at that time. And there are police reports in Greenville about my letters from the Kennedy family being stolen by the Osbourne family. The police, being who they are, they think they stole them for the money, but I know they stole them because they don't want the world to know that they're part of the people that murdered the Kennedys.
Right, definitely.
The police in Oakland and Macomb County murdered a lawyer and 2 of my judges a long time prior to me being in Tennessee, where Janet Bauman's brother was my attorney, and I hired him to file murder charges with the district attorney when they dismembered Victoria and slit her throat Halloween Eve. And 9 people did that in Johnson City, Tennessee. They murdered her a second time. I found her dead in our home, revived her, flew her to Johnson City Hospital, and after 35 days of dismembering her and sodomizing her, they slit her throat. And you know I'm telling truth because you have the hospital records.
Yep.
And I want you to include them in your book.
Right.
The police in Tennessee wrote natural causes on a dismembered body. I had to bury my wife minus her ears. There was nothing wrong with her ears. And her throat was slit Halloween Eve. And Obama's White House hired bikers to do that.
Right.
Bikers related to my second still living wife. And you're aware of that. The world is.
Yeah, they set up a headquarters or whatever you want to call it right down the street from you right before they killed her. And
Biker
then
club.
down right afterward. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they set up a Renegades Biker Club.
And then what happened to Bauman after he went to go represent you and file charges?
Bauman, I gave him a book I wrote. It was about this big, handwritten, about my wife's murder and who did it and why and how, and all the specifics. And he never made it to the DA's office. He was killed that night. And then the police in that town, they said he had a heart attack, but he was younger than me. These people, they always die of heart attacks, but they're younger than me. And then think about Huey Lewis in the news. The heart of rock and roll is still beating. And you know as well as I do that Billy Squire is really Craig, and Craig is chief of police in Detroit right now, with Jim Duggan there. And Duggan and Hogan and DuPont and the WWF stole my trademark and publishing license, Bottom Line in New York, worldwide, Bottom Line Events. Mm-hmm. That's my stolen trademark. And they did that as the guy who funded my school, Warren High School, Webster. He removed 300,000 words out of the dictionary and added Bottom Line. He added my stolen trademark as he removed 300,000 English words. So now your generation sees my trademark in your dictionary. Everybody's using it after the corporation stole it. And a word in the dictionary can't be a trademark. So they made it look like the trademark never existed.
Right.
And all of this was done prior to Janet Bauman marrying Mr. Barclay, who I worked for years before. And when I was working for Mr. Barclay, I was 15, playing music as Bottom Line in his clubs and lounges, long before Janet married him. At my church where I was going, learning Latin at the time, my mother was trying to raise me to be a priest. Two guys older than me kidnapped me at my church. They drugged me with a pill that had the brand name Roller on it, R-O-E-L-L-E-R, I believe, or R-O-H-E-L-L-E-R. And I don't do drugs, but I had just bought my first car. They didn't have one. They needed a car. They drugged me and left me in a bathtub full of water, almost dead. And they took my car, drove it to the airport across from Barclay's Bar and Grill where I performed, and they stole an airplane. It was on the front page of the news.
Yeah.
Understand this?
Mm-hmm.
And the two people that drugged me and stole my car were Nick Nicholas and Jerry Prokas. And they went to St. Anne's with Joe Walsh with me. And I'm naming names. because I'm tired of what my community in Oakland County and Macomb County, what they have done to me is disgusting. So I'm naming names. And you know I am, Greg, and I'll never stop. I'm going to name names until I die, because you murdered my wives. You murdered 4 of my wives, dozens of kids all around me. Nobody went to jail. And you caused a war with me. And I'm at war with my community. And I'm not going to stop naming names and saying truth. Here's Janet Bauman, and she married Mr. Barclay. Evidently, I don't know if Mr. Barclay knew she was dating me the whole time he was dating her, but one day she called me, and we had just been out on a date, and she made love to me all night. She called me the next morning, and she said, "Hugh, guess what?" And I said, "What?" She goes, "I'm getting married." And I thought she was proposing to me. And she told me no, she was going to marry Mr. Barclay. And it was a surprise to me. I didn't know she even knew him. And she married Mr. Barclay. And back prior to that, Janet's mom and dad, they were from Texas. You had TV series Dallas. Remember Dallas Jr. And his name was, what was his name? Do you remember?
No, I never used to watch it. I think my mom did.
But I was being used in that TV series about Dallas corporations. And I was running Acme Cleveland Corporation out of Ohio in Troy, Michigan at 19. And Janet's father was Max Bauman in Texas. And they lived in Houston. I'm Hugh, and Houston is Harris County. Harris is my grandfather. And Harris left me a lot of money that my own family stole from me. And all of this occurred within a few years of this whole time period I'm talking about. You had on MTV, and I had just divorced Mary, and my family gave the world the internet and cable TV. I'm Joe Jacobs' family, and the Gates family are my cousins. My second wife, who's still alive, her family are Cook and Perry, who is Apple Computer. And she married me so her family could spy on me as I built electronic things for corporations like Chrysler and GM and Ford, because my former wife, her father gave Gates the software to make his first Microsoft computer. And then she hated my first wife. And her father was an ex-state policeman because he murdered a guy. Evidently, he murdered the wrong guy and lost his job. And there's more to that story. He also took a shot at me, his own son-in-law. When I stood over a hole he dug as Jimmy Hoffa disappeared. And none of that's coincidence. I divorced that woman, and then my next 4 wives were murdered by bikers. And her family ran the bike clubs. From her father to her brother, and all her friends were bikers. So, and she's the one wife I had that's still alive. So that speaks volumes to me. And I also realized some of the phone calls I got as my wife's throat was slit and her ears were cut off, and as Terry were murdered. I know those people from her family in Michigan. Mm-hmm. But because the police turned a blind eye to those murders, the police in Greenville, where I and my wives lived, were selling drugs illegally. Half the police force ended up in jail because the FBI put them there after they stung them selling drugs. And all of them used fake names and badge numbers when I made out murder reports at my home, fake names and badge numbers. And then in the city, she was murdered the second time. The sheriff, who's a black man and the head of that police department, instead of opening a murder case, he said, can't we just leave the murder up to God? And it took me 5 years to open a murder case after they murdered her brother, who was my attorney, on his way to the DA the same day my wife was murdered.
Mhm.
So one great big cover up on the Manning Ranch.
Massive.
And then,
Has to be government.
and then CBS, Tom Garrett and Major Elliot Garrett sent me all those FBI computers, and then they wanted them back. And when I sent them back with different hard drives, because I had repaired them, they got all upset and destroyed my income. CBS did that. As Walters was my wife's advocate in Johnson City Hospital, and on the day they cut her ears off, they used Walter's phone, her advocate, to call me and shout Slater into my ear right from my wife's hospital room as they cut her ear off with a paper punch.
Yeah, right after Walters asked you to burn down the properties for an insurance fraud.
Right. So this is CBS and Walter State College family killing my wives,
Yeah.
attempting to murder me, breaking into my home with Osbourne, stealing all my Kennedy correspondence during the 99th, 100th, 101st sessions of Congress and prior. The very people who kidnapped and raped me at 4 in Oakland County, Michigan. And none of this is coincidence. This is nationwide crime, hiding my truth of the Oakland County Child killers, Jimmy Hoffa's real killer, and the Kennedy family killers. So I name names now because my life is history and I know it. And eventually my truth is going to become your history. Most people call me a liar and laugh at me, but you know, Greg, I have real documents that back up every word I say. I have Senate letters. I have publishing licenses from federal courts. I had a civil rights case right in the Pentagon on 9/11. Kennedy was killed at the Trade Mart, which was the Twin Towers, prior to them being built. My baby pictures were taken by Towers on Kodak film. Your virus now, COVID, the company making the vaccination, Pfizer, as I was kidnapped, my twin was murdered, they gave you Preparation H, Pfizer. And then, you know, Greg, I made a video about the virus being made in 2014 and warned everybody. Nobody listened. Everybody thinks I'm a liar. And you know that.
Yeah, you had some girl today trying to call you a liar, saying nobody's writing a book about you. Here I am.
Yeah. And every day of my life, if I tell people, well, I used to go out to dinner with B.B. Bourne and Stanley Mills, they call me a liar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a lie, it's true.
Yeah.
My family was writing the songs Elvis Presley sang in his movies and in Vegas the day I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And you know yourself, Greg, I rent a home to a person who ran Caesar's Tahoe, don't I?
Yeah.
You know the person.
Yeah.
But I'm a liar. And that, I won't say it anymore. But Janet Barclay, her father was Max. And as I met her and Tony Toku and Miller, the world got Max Headroom on MTV. And it wasn't coincidence. And you can imagine I had some head from my secretary for a long time.
Right.
And she was old enough to be my mother. She was 19 years older than me. And she was the best piano player I ever met. And she was amazed when I wrote all these songs on a piano and went to college for music and sat down next to her and played her piano with her. And I was a publisher and nobody ever knew it. I didn't tell a soul. Martin Gould made me a publisher as every friend and relative I had stole my business from me behind my back. Even my own mother and father helped my brothers and sisters and my best friends on earth steal my business in a home I purchased for them 15 years earlier. My own parents helped them do it. All my relatives helped them do it. Not one person said in my ear, "They're stealing your business." And they had to practice in my mother and father's home for several months to steal my business overnight.
Yeah. Yep.
And I even have photos showing me they did that. So I have no family. I have a family that stole my inheritance, a family that stole my business, my name, and my IRS tax licenses. As I became a ASCAP BMI publisher and was about to publish my own relatives, they stole my business, not knowing I was a publisher. So
Yeah, that's what led to 9/11.
Yes, that's correct. And so the joke is on them.
Yeah,
not-
because they would have all been rich.
Yeah, I could have made them all billionaires. I had a new genre of music, a new type of music. Instead, you got rap.
Hmm.
And this is truth. There's no
Right.
lie.
It's sort of similar to that new genre. And yeah. Mhm.
There's no lie in this.
Yeah. No, I know. I heard one of your, yeah, you played it for me a little bit. Mhm. Amazing.
It's amazing how a person, I'm almost 70 now, I'm 69. I can look back on my entire life, Mr. Bo, and I never had one real friend or one real relative. And if I call them on the phone, they all love me nowadays, but I never call.
Right. But they've asked you to kill people for them. They stole your businesses.
Right.
They
They
put
my
you
life.
down, don't let you talk at funerals. Yeah, I understand. Terrible people.
You know my life. No, they're all
Yeah.
Christians, Craig. They're all Christians.
Yeah, they all love
And
God. Right.
my ancestors authored the Bible, King James. They're all related to all the kings in Europe. Interesting, isn't it?
Right. Now, you were talking earlier about Sirhan and Bobby Kennedy, and it sparked my mind thinking about how Scorsese said that Sheerhan killed Jimmy Hoffa. And that was, that sounds just like Sirhan.
I know
And then the same,
they made fun of me my whole life growing up.
yeah, the same year, 1975, Hoffa disappeared. Sheerhan, another Sheerhan, joined the band Boston, where Kennedy was from, which it's amazing how it all goes together.
You didn't catch this in this video, but this is truth. When the Vietnam War was going on, Because I'm one of Admiral Byrd's relatives, you had Huey helicopters on the Enterprise in Vietnam. I'm
Yeah.
Huey.
Mhm.
Prior to the Bell Huey being the Huey, it was the Iroquois helicopter.
Mhm.
And when I escaped Osbourne's basement, I lived on an Iroquois reservation.
Mhm.
That's how I was protected by an Indian chief in my neighborhood who worked with me.
And now the helicopters are called Apaches. Is that where you're going with that?
That's when I divorced my Apache wife, who's still alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Only one of my wives who wasn't murdered.
Right.
Gee, I wonder why.
Right. Right. And they own MGM too. The Apaches, they run MGM Studios, and that's where the 2017 Las Vegas shootings
Well,
happened.
they marked me my whole life through.
Yeah, it's unreal.
And when your book comes out, they're going to attack you.
Oh, wow.
They do it through the news. Graham will attack you through Michigan News,
Mhm.
Trump's friend. And MGM will make movies and try to say you're lying. And I'm not a
Sure.
liar.
Oh, didn't they already do that? Putting out a news article about a golden cube is exactly
My-
one cubit,
my
like I
whole
wrote about in
life,
my last
yeah.
book.
My whole life, they've done that, Greg.
Yeah. And they put
They
another
hide
guy
me.
named
They
Greg
hide
out
me.
there, and he wrote a book that
They
looks just
hide me
like
behind
mine.
my next door neighbors, Roseanne Barr and Kathy O'Brien. Dr. O'Brien, I was at his bedside the day he died. Roseanne Barr and Graham and O'Brien weren't. And they've hidden me on Graham Media in Detroit my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's all in my videos. And I'm
Yeah.
not lying. I couldn't possibly make up a story like this. And you know that, Greg. Do I ever lie to you?
No, like you were dating Sharon Collins, and then the people that raped you, the Osbournes, Ozzy Osbourne marries Sharon Collins. I mean, what are the chances, right? And then Graham Media puts Marie Osbourne on his Channel 4 station in Detroit, on the radio.
Right.
WJR.
And then my whole life is like that. It's not just Osbourne. There's Mick Jagger married Hall. Hall was sitting in the corner raping me too.
Yeah, and Hall's handed the loaded gun to
Baldwin, my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
At Rust, as Rusty Killen called me and said he was going to shoot me in the back of the head. I know.
Right.
And on and on and on. And that just happened this past year.
Yeah, shot Helena Hudge, however her last name is, Hutchinson or whatever it is, and her initials are HH, and you're Hugh with the H and H. It's real obvious.
It's just amazing. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
I saved Baldwin's life at the Fox home before Fox Entertainment or Fox News existed.
Yeah.
I saved Baldwin.
So Hall's basically set up Alec Baldwin basically for that.
Yeah, Hall handed Baldwin a loaded gun.
Yeah.
I don't think I know it. Too
Yeah.
bad Baldwin don't. Baldwin's been busy hiding me his entire career with Dustin Hoffman.
Well, the good that did, and they turned around and framed him.
I was working, listen, Greg, I was working for John Wayne, the Morrison family.
Yeah.
Because they killed Jim Morrison in France. Huey Lewis came from France, took my name.
Mm-hmm.
And Morrison is John Wayne. So they kill Hoffa, try to tell me I did it, detain me for his murder, as I'm working for Morrison, John Wayne. Mm-hmm. And then they give the world Dustin Hoffman. Oh, they dusted off Hoffa.
Right.
With a Russian guy from the Ukraine. He's another actor from Russia. Interesting, my life, isn't it?
It never ends.
Before Janet met me and I met her father, Max, from Texas. Now listen, the Vietnam War was going on and my cousin was piloting the Enterprise in Vietnam. It had Huey helicopters and John McCain on it. They murdered the Heath family on my birthday, July 4th, she was going to marry me. She created the Head Start program for President Ronald Reagan. 2 policemen kidnapped her out of her Wisconsin CPS office, protecting kids on the Great Lakes from people making pornographic movies out of a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. I believe that was their ages. A little girl and a little boy. The little girl was 2, the boy was 7. They were making porno movies. She's protected them. 2 off-duty cops kidnap her, drive her across 5 states. She calls me, asks me to help her. I buy her the Manning Ranch, which they set me up on. And then they come and they murder her there on my birthday. That same year. She wasn't there on that ranch 6 months. They murdered her.
Yeah.
And then they said she committed suicide.
And so now Joe Biden takes the kids coming across the border and sends them right up there to
Wisconsin,
Yeah.
right where Terry ran the CPS office.
Right.
That's where they send the Mexican kids.
Clearly
now.
there's some pedophile thing going on up there, right?
Yeah, on the Great Lakes, Greg. That's where they fly them out to the gay bars.
Yeah.
They sell them there.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah. I don't exist in any media, and nobody will interview me. And you know yourself, all the newscasters. Who's Anderson Cooper, Greg?
Well, I mean, that's pretty obvious. You get the 2 names there. Of course, he's gay, so that tells you right there that, the gays are marking you. And then it's Anderson's one of the rapists in Osbourne's basement, and Cooper was the one that raped one of your relatives. So you got
My daughter.
Well, I didn't know if you wanted to say that or not. Yeah, now
And he's on CNN.
Mhm.
And he's been on CNN since May Musk had Elon Musk, and she took the place of Kiki's sister when they murdered Kiki on Maybelline magazine.
Yeah.
And my family, the Harris family, I believe they own Maybelline magazine before we gave the world computers via Gates at Microsoft. And we sold all our magazines. And who did Biden give you? Biden, he gave you the wife of an entertainment lawyer who says her name is Harris when it's really Emhoff. I'm the Harris family.
Right.
And there are no Black women in my family. My family is 100% European DNA, just like Admiral Byrd was.
Right.
And you can do my DNA anytime. It's real amazing what my neighbors in Michigan and Oakland County did to make money and become senators and take over the White House. They killed dozens and dozens and dozens of kids all my life. Not a person went to jail. And they dumped the bodies all around me. They're still dumping bodies all around me. Nobody goes.
Yeah, you moved out west, and taxi driver Huey Hughson with your name.
And nobody goes to jail. Every murder in my life, nobody goes to jail. When somebody goes to jail, it's always a patsy who didn't do the murder.
Now, we were talking about Barclay. Now there's Barclay Banks, and now they're setting up the CEO of Barclay Banks, or maybe he really did, I don't know, with ties to Epstein.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
Yeah, well, I think you gave me the story. Maybe, I don't remember. I may have found it.
Well, I taught electronics and science with Jim Garrison in Warren, Michigan. He was my alumni, the guy that created the JFK archives with Manning, where my wives were murdered. So you got Garrison and Manning in my life. I was teaching electronics at 14 in Warren Consolidated to high school students. So Garrison was my alumni. And my girlfriend was Mary Pat Cotter. And the world got Welcome Back Cotter.
Yeah, TV
and
series.
The principal would come out every day and scream at Epstein. And Scientology tried to recruit me before they recruited Travolta.
Yeah. Yeah, Halberd used to come out to your school, didn't he?
Yeah, in Warren, Michigan. He ran Scientology in Michigan, in Warren, Michigan, right at my high school. Tried to recruit me before he recruited Travolta. I told him, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And you know, nobody's going to believe. Everybody thinks I'm lying, and you know I'm not.
Right. Definitely.
You got a college degree as a Baptist minister, correct, Greg?
And even that's connected. Just people that made that are connected to your life.
And your wife did the same, right?
Yeah, well, she went there. Mhm.
But and you research everything I say, correct?
Definitely. Yeah.
But you're a liar too.
Right.
Everybody calls me a liar, Greg.
Right.
And you know, this is real. My publishing license is real. You see this? You think it's real?
Looks pretty real. The hospital reports are real.
I told the printer how to do it.
Yeah.
See it?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I did that on over 2,000 songs nobody ever heard.
Yeah.
Because everybody stole my name, my life, my IRS license, my federal publishing license. They stole every facet of my life as they murdered my wives and murdered dozens and dozens of kids all around me and made movies about it, minus me. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and no matter how much we say, it feels like the tip of the iceberg. There's just so much more.
Nobody cares. Yeah, there's always more because I'm marked in everything. My relative was Edgar Allan Poe's literary critic in London.
Yeah, and one of those
My
literary
grandparents.
critics was named George Bush.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. But I'm a liar, Greg.
Right.
You know, I just happen to be related to Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
And the president that ran
and Congress
ASCAP,
investigated
him and Sinatra are hugging each other in photos I have. And on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And you know this.
Yeah, you're related to Gardner, your aunt, and she was married to Mickey Rooney, and you
Christie's
have paperwork
my
with his
other aunt,
signature on it.
Christie.
Yeah.
Gonzalez, who made the Texas Rangers. But they tell you two white guys did that instead of a Mexican nowadays. They don't want you to know a Mexican created the Texas Rangers, Greg.
Yeah.
They want you to think that Walker did it. Remember?
Yeah, Walker, Texas Ranger. Walker,
Yeah,
the same guy that runs the CIA, George Herbert Walker Bush,
Yeah.
Walker, Haspel.
Yeah. And this is how they've hidden me.
Detective Walker with Oswald.
They've hidden me in all the Hollywood movies and all over the globe. And I can walk, I can walk into a library, pick up every book, and just show you where I'm in the book. And they've completely hidden me. In every country on earth, they've hidden me after murdering my family. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times they murdered my whole family. I still didn't finish, Craig. My cousin piloted the Enterprise with Huey helicopters on it. I'm Admiral Byrd's relative. I have a letter from the Byrd family as my wife Victoria was murdered the 2nd time in Johnson City.
Yeah, saw that.
My brother was one of the people who ran Fort Knox, Tony Ramatowski, during the Vietnam War, as my cousin piloted the Enterprise. And then Schofield, one of my cousins, the Schofield Bible, he ran Camp Lejeune. Now, when Schofield came to me in his little Ford Pinto to Fort Knox with my brother, Tony, we went out and ate, and Schofield put his arm around me, hugged me. And he goes, look at these pictures of the gooks. I cut their heads off and posted them around the villages. And this is the family that prints and publishes the Schofield Bible. And then when he left me back at Fort Knox with my brother, Tony.
Mhm.
He told me he was going to take me to the max. Janet Barclay from Texas, and her father was Max. And you got Max Headroom on TV as she gave me head. No lie in this, Craig. They took me to the max.
Hmm.
And I'm marked by all media,
Wow.
only I don't exist.
Every day you can tell me something new. It's unreal.
I know. My life is unreal.
And Tony from Fort Knox, I think he introduced you to your first wife too, I think. Didn't he?
Well, when I was sitting in Al Brooks Patterson's office trying to make out a murder report against Osbourne and Hall, they murdered Tony's son, little Tony.
Hmm.
And they murdered Kiki's daughter,
Yeah.
Serena. As I sat in Al Brooks Patterson's office, and they gave America this BS story about Dr. Nasser at MSU, a doctor looking at little girls' vaginas.
Yeah. Yeah. They turn the attention
My
away.
truth, my truth didn't matter. And that same police department murdered Tony Ramatowski's son and Serena Kissel, two kids in my family, as I tried to make out a murder report in the Oakland County Child killings.
Right. And then you left there. You go through Las Vegas to take pictures of the Red Garter clubs that became Bottom Line. And while you're there, they staged the big attacks in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Shoot all those people
Yeah.
while you're there.
From Seinfeld, Mandalay and Vandalay.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I entered Vegas, that attack happened. It's not a coincidence.
No.
And I'm the only guy on earth that knows these things. And everybody calls me a liar. And, they keep trying to murder me. Every time they murdered my wives, they tried to murder me too. It's just I'm a guy and I can fight. My last wife was in a wheelchair with muscular dystrophy as they cut her ears off and tortured her. They took a girl out of her wheelchair and sodomized her, and then they slit her throat Halloween Eve. Nice people, and they hide this stuff. They called her death missing her ears. They called it natural causes, Greg.
Yeah, slit throat and hospital records.
And you realize policemen and district attorneys have to do that.
Right.
And hospital administrators.
And now when you call back down there to the police department down there, the detective never existed.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you have witnesses even on videos talking about how when you call the FBI, they just hang up on you. They won't even listen.
Yeah, no, they hang up because the very person that runs the sex crime division is the family that kidnapped me.
Osbourne, right there where it all began.
In 1957, right. Yeah, and I have witnesses, and I don't make it a habit of calling the FBI. I do make it a habit of posting my truth to them every day now. I throw it right in their faces because they won't take murder reports.
Right. Well, that's a lot to take in. So I guess maybe we'll stop there. There's no end to it. We could talk forever.
That was Janet Barclay, and I was a bad guy. When I lived on that farm, I had sex with Carrie Firestarter. Mm-hmm. I had sex with Bobby Brooks, Jesse's girl. Giles put me on that farm I got from Trump's tax attorney. Mary Miller, the computer science teacher, used to come over and have sex with me. And Janet Barclay set me up with Miller and Toko and Sarah McLaughlin's family at Shelby Service Center. And we always rented that building from Jack Ruby's trademark, the Carousel. Interesting, huh?
It doesn't even touch it, Hugh.
And I'm a liar. I'm not. And you know, I own a ministry in the Bible Belt, right?
Yeah, that
But I'm a
got
liar.
catch up with.
I owned a ministry for 25 years in the Bible Belt, and I'm a liar. And I say 25 years because the guy that made me a partner, Cook, that was my wife's family. And he made me a partner so I could steal my money and keep me from hiring another attorney when they killed my wife and murdered my attorney.
Right. Yeah, your wife's family Cook are in the ministry, right?
James Bauman, her brother. And that's James Bauman next to her, her son.
Yeah. Mhm.
And without a doubt, she was one of the best piano players on earth. And Greg, you know, I'm Isabella Gardner, the museum in Boston where Kennedy was born. And I'm the Da Vinci family. You know this.
Yeah.
This woman was the best piano player on earth. They wouldn't let her on the radio.
Yeah. Heck, you had Bach in your band.
Yeah, that's right. My first band was Doug Bach. That's correct.
Yeah.
Never ends. Let's end it here, Greg. It's never ending.
Right.
Bach was lead guitar player in my band, as Stephen King, my cousin, wrote the Bachman. What was it?
Yeah.
The Towers. Remember the book? It was The Towers.
And President Ford was King family.
And
too.
Doug Bachman was the main character in the book about the towers. And that was years before the towers were built, Greg. Just like my baby pictures, all taken by towers on 9/11. 1953, 9/11. George Towers took all my baby pictures. Gee, who was in the Pentagon when they blew up my civil rights case? George Little.
Yeah.
They had Rich Little on TV, and I had purchased a Corvette for George. Unbelievable. But I'm a liar, Greg, and I don't exist. Anything else you want to know?
We better stop it there. It's getting long, but a lot of information. We'll pick it up next time.
We only talked for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I'll email the video to you. Put it up on YouTube.
Always do.
Take care.
That's right. See ya.